If getting your child out the door feels like you're negotiating a hostage release situation on a daily basis, you're not alone. The screen off before dinner time battle, or the meltdowns leaving the grocery store, or maybe even the Sunday night dread before the work week and school week even starts. Or what about the 45-minute standoff over a pair of socks? Transitions are one of the most common flashpoints for kids in our society, and they hit way harder for kids who have underlying neurodevelopmental challenges, ADHD, anxiety, and sensory processing disorders. The harder you as a parent try to manage and mitigate this behavior, the more stuck everyone gets, including you. Here's what the parenting advice misses that I see on most situations is that smoother transitions are not a behavioral problem. It's a nervous system issue embedded inside the nervous system. Once you understand what's actually happening internally, you'll actually help to understand this drastic shift, including what kind of help actually makes the needle move. This video is intended for parents who have children with meltdown challenges, and they're doing it at every part, whether it's leaving the park, turning off the iPad, starting the school week. If you've tried those reward charts, you've done the countdowns, the consequences, the negotiations, and yet your child is still falling apart between activities, this video is going to help to give some guidance and clarity for this situation. On a regular basis in my pediatric-based office, I see parents that are exhausted. They describe the same scene over and over again. The mornings end in a meltdown, tears, transitions at school require intervention from teachers, pickup is chaotic, bedtime is even worse. It's like a 2-hour standoff. These children often already have labels by doctors, and the parents not necessarily understanding how these neurodevelopmental challenges affect transitions. The family's already tried the therapies, you've done the parenting books, you've done the accommodations at school, you've done the transitional tools that the internet helps. These things help a little bit, but nothing gets to the core cause, the root issue, which is why it continues to repeat itself. You're not failing as a parent, they're just not giving you guidance where you need it. The negotiations and the countdowns, they require the nervous system to downshift, and that's what has some major disturbances within these kiddos. And the numbers back up why these struggles cluster together. In fact, in 2022, a national survey found anxiety was the most common co-occurring condition in kids with ADHD, roughly 4 out of 10 kids. And this overlap isn't a coincidence. It's because these conditions share a common neurological root. And that's why when you address the root, instead of chasing symptoms in a system that simply doesn't have the capacity to settle, that's where we're going to get some drastic shift. Transitions demand a lot from a developing brain. And for our kiddos, their brains are still developing. But it is way more struggling for kiddos who already have challenges with processing their environment or even processing their bodies. So transitions ask the brain to disengage. You've got to hold that next step in mind, and then you got to shift gears all at once. And it sounds basic, but there is a lot of processing inside. This is what we call set shifting, and it moves attention from one task to another. It runs on executive function internally within the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain. And that's what keeps maturing into the mid-20s. However, for kids with ADHD, anxiety, and sensory processing challenges, the circuits in that prefrontal cortex don't develop the same way as kids who their bodies process the environment properly. And not only does it not process properly, but it also doesn't activate properly compared to neurotypical children. It's a much slower process. They're several years behind their age. And that's where the traffic jam starts to occur inside the brain with these impulses and communication. It's a processing challenge. The harder the brain is already working, the more taxing and challenging it can be, which means that for a lot of kiddos who are overstimulated, their body and their brain is working in overdrive. That's why they're always running around. They're always creating sensory or physical movement changes in their body language. Their brains are super active. I mean, think of it at bedtime. You get a kid with ADHD, they're exhausted. You can look in their eyes, you know they're tired, but their body is still all wound up. That's exactly where we start to see these issues. A small request, put your shoes on. It can actually land a much bigger one internally for your child. And the goal here is to improve how your child's brain processes this actual transaction. And once we can improve that communication pathway, it helps to alleviate some of that stress. Now, a child with hyperactivity or anxiety or SPD, they have a stressed out nervous system. It's always on overdrive and is super dysregulated. So the nervous system has two branches. You have the autonomic nervous system that works like a vehicle. You got a gas pedal, you've got a brake pedal. So the gas pedal is the sympathetic portion, which is fight or flight, designed for short periods of emergency situations. And this is the activation, the alertness, the go. Incredibly important. But as we see on the opposite end, the parasympathetic nervous system is essential as well. Rest, digest, restore. This is like the brake pedal. It's the calm, the regulation, the ability to adapt to the environment. So a lot of kiddos today, they live in this stuck gas pedal, weak brake pedal orientation, and is driven by a very underactive, inefficient vagus nerve. Part of that pump in the brake pedals, the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, this imbalance in the nervous system is called dysautonomia, and it keeps the body in low-grade alarm. It's why a lot of kids with SPD, they get into a situation that's very calm. You know, everyone else is nice and relaxed, but their transitions put them into a panic state. And you can feel their heart racing. You can see the fear in their eyes. You can see their body language start to change. You can see them getting desperate for change. And that's just the really underlying challenge, is that ordinary change will actually register as a threat. And that's when a meltdown happens. So this change in a transition, it registers to most of us as no big deal. We're going to drop this and do this. For a kid who's having some challenges neurologically, it creates a threat environment. So they go into a panic state. They go into a sympathetic dominant fight or flight state. But here's the thing, they're already in that sympathetic dominant state before they had that threat come into their environment. So it creates this panicky situation on different levels. And the meltdown then, it's not a behavior. You cannot negotiate a meltdown. That kid's nervous system takes over. You have to stand back and watch. So here's the thing, is the root cause of these three conditions, ADHD, anxiety, and SPD, they all share the same neurological root cause. The diagnosis by doctors is different. The medication they may be pushing on you is different, but the underlying neurological pattern, it's strikingly similar. And there's so many overlaps. And that's the challenge of these diagnostic expressions, is that they don't identify the individual nor the individual's needs. So all three involve sympathetic dominance, and they show a reduced capacity for flexible, regulated brain states. So that's where the brain is overstimulated, overregulated, and then from there the nervous system just doesn't communicate properly to the body. So let's check it out. A kid with ADHD, they find it almost physically painful to break away from one preferred activity. Whereas a kiddo with anxiety, they get flooded with worry before the change ever occurs. And a kid with SPD is already overstimulated, overworking to process the sound, the light, the touch. Their bodies cannot handle changes in their environment to a larger degree. And this is why the behavior charts often fall flat. And that's where you can't discipline a nervous system into being regulated. Now, this doesn't happen without cause, and that's incredibly important. It's not what's being done right at this moment, but it's this perfect storm of events that create this dysregulated nervous system. It's what we call as the perfect storm, and it's the sequence of events, of stressors, physical, chemical, and emotional stressors that overwhelm a developing nervous system. You have to understand that that's the key. It's the developing nervous system. It's why you don't see an adult who's healthy in their 30s all of a sudden develop autism in their 40s. It's why an adult who's 40, who's really relaxed and chill, doesn't all of a sudden develop ADHD in their 50s or 60s. You have this developing brain, this developing nervous system, and it can happen even preconception. We look at the environment of what is creating this baby. Look at the environment of how mom and dad are doing. Preconception stress is huge. I mean, let's look at the obvious. Fertility struggles. If a woman's body is having struggles with fertility, there's an underlying reason for it. And that's where the body is intelligent. It does not allow conception to occur if the environment inside that body is unable to really allow that to process and grow. So we have to look at the health prior to that. Then we look at their pregnancy journey. I mean, pregnancy in this country has become pathologized. It is no longer a natural process. It is a disease orientation. You're in a hospital for 6-7 months during that process, getting routine evaluations and checkups, but nothing in that environment is actually making you healthier. They're just checking to see if you're sick. So these emotional stressors, I mean, look at moms nowadays. They're working full time up until like a week or two until they give birth. We look at all these different stressors. Then we look at how the actual stress hormones when mom is pregnant, cortisol does cross the placenta, and it primes that developing brain and nervous system to be hypersensitive to environments because the baby's growing in a stressful environment, so their body's all stressed out. One of the biggest parts though is then birth trauma. And we're talking intervention, anything other than the way that God designed a birth to occur. We're talking very obvious C-section, forceps, vacuum extractions. But then we're looking at the things that are so incredibly common that nobody asks about: inductions, epidurals, things that create a lot of stress and strain. I mean, chemicals in pregnancy are bad. We all know that. But pregnancy or chemicals right at the point of birth, no big deal. Those can contribute challenges to an already dysregulated nervous system. Then what happens is we have the early years. They start to stress and pile on. So maybe your kids had recurring ear infections. They've had several rounds of antibiotics. They've had injuries. They had slips and falls. They're on their screen time from the time they're in a car seat into their young childhood. And our world is crazy overstimulating in the beginning. So each of these stressors may not be a big deal individually, but when you stack them together, that's what leaves the gas pedal stuck on that developing nervous system. And the result is what we call subluxation. It's a neurological interference that creates the stress response to be locked in. And that's where it's hard for them to actually have growth and development in the future. Now, I've got a few things that you can try at home, some things that can be helpful. I find that giving previews or countdowns so that the brain has time to process and prepare so the kid's not getting blindsided. Something like, hey, Johnny, 5 minutes, we're going to be heading out the door, so I just want you to start cleaning up. A couple minutes later. Now remember, Johnny's not keeping a stopwatch, so we're just giving him some countdowns. A couple minutes later, hey Johnny, let's go ahead and get ready for going to the door. We're going to be leaving soon. Give them heads up versus them having playtime, you rushing, running late, walking straight into the room saying, hey, we got to go. Give them a little bit of time so they can process that. Another thing is to build predictable routines. They need sequences each and every day because a sequence of a transition will turn into a habit, and that will formulate much easier. Add movement. A lot of these kids love exercise and movement. Do a quick stretch in the morning. Do jumping jacks right before you walk out the door. Do something fun and engaging with your child because it helps to disengage that stress response. You also got to do some things beforehand. You have to protect sleep. Now, I know it's a struggle because a lot of these kiddos, they already have challenges with falling asleep and staying asleep, but you got to really make sure that sleep is present because that's where the brain recharges, and that's where it aids in the regulatory capacity within their nervous system. And you, mom and dad, you've got to stay regulated yourself. So many parents that I see in my practice, they're watching over their kids getting adjusted, they're getting adjusted as well. They are way dysregulated and they stress me out, let alone the kids' co-regulation with the adult around them. So you got to be regulated yourself, you got to be mentally healthy as well. And if those strategies aren't enough, that signals that your nervous system, your child's nervous system, really needs some deeper support. So the premise is that most kiddos can make easier transitions by parents following some easy steps to give them some guidance. If that doesn't work, nothing other than labeling and just accepting it is going to work for you. You've got to do some deeper support and deeper analysis of where that dysregulated nervous system is actually occurring. So the basics is that if your kid keeps having these meltdowns and every transition is a disaster, then it's time to start looking at other alternatives. I can promise you it's not a discipline issue. It's something that they're not going to just grow out of on their own. It will evolve into other challenges in the future. It is a tall tale sign that their nervous system needs support. And that's where we come in, because at Maximize Chiropractic in West Sacramento, I use first technology that actually evaluates how the nervous system is functioning. We start with heart rate variability to understand how that vagus nerve is actually engaging and disengaging heart rate. It helps us to understand how balanced the nervous system actually is when a child comes into the practice. We also use a surface EMG, which looks at energy, tone, coordination, efficiency within the neurospinal system. And then we use thermography, which is actually a thermometer check on the actual nervous system. So we're looking for inflammatory states, both acute and chronic. These scans just help us to understand where the dysregulation is, and then it allows us to understand what the driving force is. From the scan analysis, we create customized care plans so that you know exactly what's necessary, how often they get adjusted, how often we redo the scans. And then we do super gentle, very specific adjustments to their spine and nervous system to help restore balance. It helps to ease that gas pedal that's stuck on their nervous system, and it helps to re-engage that brake pedal through the vagus nerve. As that happens, parents tell me that their daily flashpoints start to soften. The transitions in the mornings are easier, they have fewer meltdowns at pickup, and smoother transitions, bedtime, they're sleeping better, they're falling asleep better. It's phenomenal. So your child doesn't need another label, which is why they're not going to get one here. You need answers though, and you need guidance. So if you want to click on that link below in our bio, take a look at what we focus on in neurologically focused chiropractic care, because we can really help that transitional period improve. And it's all about unraveling those stress patterns within your child's nervous system. And we look forward to serving.